Okay.
All right.
Everybody's here. Yay.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to thank you all for coming and for being here. Couldn't do the whole code committee thing without you. We know it's a big time commitment, but we really appreciate it. Just generally the plan for the meeting, we're going to do some quick sort of intros and formalities here at the beginning, and then we'll get right into it. Give you a little bit of an overview of the code process as a part of the formalities, and a little bit of an overview of how the process here is going to work for the code committee meetings. But right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off with some introductions. I am Andy Bolton. I am a policy analyst for the division. Go ahead and give the handoff to Mr. Mark Heiser.
Hi, Andy. Mark Heiser with division. I am been here about 11 years now. This is fourth mechanical code, I think, or at least third one we've been through on adoption since I've been here. Work out in industry for a long time, and really do want to express my appreciation for people taking the time out to come in and provide the feedback we need for the committee to give to the mechanical board. It's really great to see a diverse group here participating today. Thank you.
Okay. Laura, how about you go ahead and give an introduction if you don't mind.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Burns. I've worked with the division for about 10 years now, and I've been adopting the state building code for 6, I think. I'll be coordinating your meetings. I'm the one who's been emailing you. And if you need anything, please let me know.
Okie dokie. I'm going to go ahead and go through our committee member list. I'll go ahead and call names just to keep everything nice and orderly, so we're not all talking at the same time. And go ahead and start with Jeff Thompson.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeff Thompson. I got about 20 years of experience in commercial HVAC. I currently work for Washington County as a commercial and residential building inspector, and I'm also a combo inspector.
Thank you, Jeff. About Kevin Duell.
Yeah, hi, Kevin Duell. I'm with Northwest Natural, but have more than a couple decades of consulting work, mechanical, plumbing, design in gee, name it kind of buildings. And I've also worked in sales and energy trust of Oregon type work, and all focused on buildings. So happy to be here today.
Thank you. All right, Jeff Kennedy.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jeff Kennedy. I'm the building official of the City of Independence. I've been here over 20 years and have about 28 years in the inspection industry.
Thank you, Jeff. We have at least one more that will be joining us a little late, but we'll have him introduce himself when he gets here. Otherwise, we have a few folks on here that are either from the division or perhaps just observing. I'm going to go ahead and go through and just so we can get some names on the record here, just so we all know. Got Rich Anderson.
Thank you, Rich Anderson. I am currently a director of PMG Technical Resources with the International Code Council. Master plumber, journeyman plumber, licensed plumbing inspector. I hold an A refrigeration license with a combination endorsement with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Previous building official for Fort Collins, Colorado. Amarillo, Texas as deputy building official, and I was a division manager for commercial building inspections with the city of Austin, Texas when I was there. My current role is I am a technical resource educator on plumbing, mechanical, fuel, gas, swimming pool and spa, and the private sewage disposal code for the International Code Council. I just want to be a resource for this committee. If you need anything from me, please reach out.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, Ted Zook.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Ted Zook, Development Services Director, Building Official, Jackson County, and I serve on the mechanical board in the building official position. I'm just here to observe.
Thanks, Ted. And then there's a few more BCD folk that are on the line, so I'm going to have them go through. Let's start with Melissa Stiles.
Melissa Stiles, Policy Development Coordinator.
Thank you, Melissa. Francisco Ramos.
Good morning, Francisco Ramos here with the Division Ability Code Specialist.
Thank you, Francisco. Kelly Thomas.
Hey, Kelly Thomas with the division and the energy and mechanical team with Mark.
Thank you, Kelly. I think I got everyone. The list shifts around a little bit on me. So if I miss someone's name and you are here and would like to make that known, feel free to speak up now. All right, hearing none. Oh,
Andy, can you just give an introduction of the two of who isn't here currently, just to let them know that when they do pop in?
Sure.
Other committee
We
members.
have two more members. Scott Leverins will be showing up. As told us, he'll be showing up in a little bit, and then Troy Lowell. Scott Leverins of Jacobs Heating and Air Conditioning, and then Troy Lowell is Interface Energy Engineering, is a mechanical engineer. Okay, which may both be showing up later. That appears to be all of our names. Just gonna take a quick moment to go over like a brief overview of the code adoption process writ large. It generally starts off with selecting a base code that we're going to be basing everything off of, and then the board will have the division issue a solicitation for public proposals. We'll collect those over the course of about 45 days. And at the same time, as you all are aware, we will also be soliciting code change committee members, which is how we got you all in the room. Then the board will then appoint those code committee members that respond to the solicitation. And then we find ourselves like we are here today at a code review committee where ultimately a recommendation will be developed to present to the mechanical board. Mechanical board will then potentially approve that recommendation and direct the division to go forward with rulemaking and then adoption. The sort of roles and responsibilities of everybody here today, as I mentioned, the main job of the committee here is to develop a recommendation that then gets presented to the board. The board relies on the folks here to sort of act as the technical experts as they are putting together that recommendation for the board, because it would be a bit of a heavy lift to do at a single board meeting. So that is why you are here today, to sort of provide that considered opinion and the technical expertise to provide that recommendation to the board. As far as the staff role here today, we have Mark and Laura and folks with far more technical expertise than me that are here that can help provide sort of a sounding board or answer any questions about how the code language got put together as it was, or the process or anything like that. I am more of a policy resource than a technical resource. You may be hearing from me at times to sort of prod you on potential fiscal impacts related to specific code items. That is something that we are required by statute to include in our sort of review during rulemaking process. And there's a couple of different prongs to that analysis. On the one hand, is there going to be fiscal impact to state government or local jurisdictions? And that could be a cost increase. It could be a cost decrease. It could be something that they're doing that's going to take longer and therefore cost more as a result. Just like pretty broadly thinking of like how this could potentially impact these entities. In addition to the state and local government component, we'd also love to hear about it if it has any sort of cost increase or cost decrease impact on industry, in particular small businesses. If something is going to have a sort of wide-ranging impact on small business, we'd really like to get a good idea about that in terms of, I mean, estimates, if you have any estimates in terms of how many businesses, what the size of the impact, whether it's a, like I said, if it's making things cheaper, we would like to know about that too, not just if it's making things more expensive. That's sort of a general, so if I do come in at some point and say, hey, do you think there's going to be a fiscal impact here? That's what question I'm asking, sort of, what are the possible impacts of all types of things in terms of the money side of things? Okay, I've made it through your role, my role, Mark's role, Laura's role. And let's go ahead and Laura, are you up and ready to do a review of the materials and resources?
Yes, I am.
Sweet.
Oh, can we do a little bit more on protocol real quick, just to go through a few things, since we're going to talk about sort of some of the roles here. Is Laura's going to be the one who will be bringing items up on the screen. Want to make sure that everybody is this where we're going to go through sort of discussion and how we take care of this now, Andy?
We can.
Yeah, just want to let everyone know that we'll be looking for items on the matrix that hopefully everyone's had a chance to see, of sort of your recommendation to the boards. We're going to keep this fairly informal. The division is going to provide sort of the facilitation today. So I will be your wonderful facilitator. Laura will be the one running through documents on screen. We don't have formal proposals of, or motions that we'll be taking. It will be more or less, when we get to items that are on the matrix, sort of looking to you of sort of, okay, is this, first, do we want to discuss it in more detail? Second, getting into.
Good morning, Alana. Happy Monday. This is Ted.
Hey, Ted.
All right. So slow getting some answers back on 1099 stuff.
Hey, Ted, I know you're on the phone, but do you mind? Yeah, thank you.
Thought that was a question for us, getting a little detailed into chapter 10 already. But so we'll be looking to you for sort of, is this good? Is this bad? Well, the structural committee more or less went, let's give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I think we've got enough. Don't have a big list of people up here that we have to watch. So if you're in agreement for these individual items, one of the first ones will be in chapter 3 that we'll look at, and we'll say, okay, yes, no. And then also just want to note that, we'd like to plan on, maybe a break at about 10:30. The bio breaks, I guess, as they call them, we'll sort of take a poll about then, or if people need to do that. And then I believe a lunch break, I guess we're going to do that at noon. Is that correct? We'll look at that sometime around noon, where we've got a good stopping point, take a lunch break and come back. And then, of course, if we have the need, we can maybe take a little later break today. But I think we can get through all of the chapter 3 through 15 minus chapter 4 today. So I just wanted to go through some of what we'll be doing right now as we're kicking in. Anything else either Laura or Andy would like to cover on this, or just
really
I'm
quickly
gonna go over. Sorry, I'm gonna go over the setup for all the materials.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now you should see my web page. Do you see that? Yep. Okay. So in the chat, I put the link to the committee webpage. This is a committee webpage resource. It's not public. It's just for the committee. All of the scheduled days are here with the agenda. At the end of the meeting, we'll talk about possibly rescheduling the November 8th meeting for some scheduling issues. So you'll find the agendas over here, though. This is where I post them. And the committee matrix is right here. This is what's going to help us through the flow of the meeting. And each one of on the side, each item has a number. I used just the chapter and then it's 5.1, 5.2 so that we can add more without renumbering a million. This is just a tool. It will change over the course of the committee meetings, and I will be updating them after every meeting. I'll be posting them and then emailing them to you, all of you, the committee members, to make sure that I annotated everything properly. And the way that you think the committee went. I will get things mixed up sometimes just through editing. So please keep me honest and I will fix everything as we go. Then over on the committee page, there's the code amendment proposals. We have 4 of them. None of them are on the schedule today. They will be on the next meeting. And then here's all the code docs that we will be going through that you can see from the committee page. And in each code doc, we have colors and all kinds of stuff that you probably need to know what they mean. The cross through red is what Oregon, our current amendments, what we currently delete from the code, from the model code. If it's underlined and it's blue, it's our added language to the code. If it's in a box, it's usually a text box. You guys have seen the code. It's a note or some information outside of the code. And then I will be, if there's new language, okay, here we go. So if it's new IMC language, then it will be in purple. It doesn't look purple on everybody's screen. So I learned that. It looks super purple to me, but that's new language. If we have to show the strike through language, I do have the significant changes or the red line to show you and put up on the screen so that you can see exactly what was deleted. There might be a few places where that is. And then if it's gonna be, if we add any language, a new code amendment, I'll make it a lighter or brighter blue with underline, or a brighter red for strike through. So that will happen if you guys make any edits during the process. That will happen later. So I think that's pretty much the committee members. All of your emails are here. So you can see if you have to contact one another, or if I have to contact you, I can quickly go here. And then our contact information is over here for Mark and myself. And that's it.
One quick other thing on the voting that I wanted to mention is that because we're in a technical medium and technical difficulties can always happen, particularly with a group this small, I don't want you can always potentially go back to something. It's at the committee's discretion. So if like someone accidentally drops off the video right at the time of a vote and you had something that you wanted to say and you get back on 15 minutes later, we've moved on to a different item, you can absolutely say, hey, I have something that I need to talk about this thing that already happened. It's not like it's a closed issue once the vote happens necessarily. It's just sort of the sign that we can move on. All right.
Also, do we want to say that the matrix covers the significant changes that we found that were identified in the significant changes book, and significant Oregon amendments is identified by us. If you see anything in the code docs that you want to speak about and aren't on the matrix, please feel free to bring it up and we'll add it to the matrix. We weren't trying to keep anything out. We were just trying to not speed things up, but make it easier for everybody if we've seen all of these edits before a ton of times. So. And we're off.
All right, to the committee members, on the matrix, one of the first things we're covering is we're going to look at chapter 3 for the general regulation portions. Laura, if you can bring up it, you may hear me. I may be typing notes at times. Again, nice big screen here. You can see what the red items, some of the things that we always do in our code is we reference to our specialty codes. You'll always see us when we say, instead of the plumbing, we will reference the plumbing code, which back in the definition says it's our Oregon adopted Oregon plumbing specialty code. When it comes to energy code, it's the Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code. When you go back to the definitions, there's some things that we normally take out administratively, some of the things that you see here about some of the third-party testing certifications, some things that we don't have in the state. The red items have been struck in the past. We're not carrying those forward again this year. If you could scroll down a little bit, and sometimes you'll see just again a little review for the non-code officials again. The note boxes that we put in the code, they're not adopted code, but they are pointers when we have items, say either statutes or other regulations that might affect the code. We put them in these boxes. They are for reference. You know, when it comes to solid burning, fuel burning appliances in Oregon, the Department of Environmental Quality has some regulations, some stove and wood stove and inserts in fireplace for their clean burning requirements. So we have to recognize where they have some potential authority that may come into our world in the mechanical world, say for wood burning appliances. So we'd scroll down a little bit more. We might just head down another page and maybe see some of the minor purple things that happen in the model code about bracing, where they're under seismic resistance under 301.15. Again, really big coverall here, of course, about when earthquake loads are applicable in accordance with a building code. We reference to chapter 16 of the building code and talk about anchorage in our code. So this has been a long-standing revision for us here in Oregon, but just wanted to point out one of those purple pieces. And we will try and head down to our first matrix item. Oh, and Laura, if you could stop for just a second, go back up just to show people, we now have a revised, so the barriers for vehicles drawing, it's been revised, really much clearer now. I'm trying to remember which code it was in, but one had a typo where if you look at the pipe bollard option 1, it said 1/2, not 12-inch depth on the bollard. That's been cleaned up, a lot easier to read. Staff redid these. One note about this is that in the structural code, there are requirements for protection of appliances in parking garages, and some of that comes here, that this is for really when you're in a commercial garage, protecting any appliance. They either need, of course, to be elevated, or if they're down low to where someone might hit them, the appliances, there's a requirement for protection of appliances. And this is sort of the private garage view. Thank you, Laura. So here we are. On condensate disposal, this is our first matrix item 3-1 about condensate disposal. The discharge, they're discussing how and where it can be. It's really complying with most plumbing code. To be an indirect, it needs to go either to a floor drain, floor sink, trench drain, mop sink, hub drain, standpipe, utility sink, or laundry sink. What they're clarifying, and the commentary has a really nice description of the different places that the indirect discharge indoors can go to, and also showing that there is an allowance for connection to the lavatory Y branch or tailpiece or to a bathtub overflow tailpiece is allowed. That is done under our plumbing code as well, just sort of clarifying where and how you can, don't just have it drip into a standard lavatory, say in a dwelling unit. And one other clarification in 307.2.1.1 is the last sentence that says, except where discharging to grade outdoors, the point of discharge of condensate drain shall be located within the same occupancy, tenant space, or dwelling unit as the source of the condensate. So this is to really make it clear that, yes, if it happens to plug for your dwelling unit, you see it's going to where you can have someone service it, so that they aren't crossing potential lines of ownership or, say, rental agreements, so that, you know, tenant space A, their drain has to connect either within the tenant space or be piped to a separate outdoor discharge to make sure that this can be maintained. So want to see if there's any discussion from the building officials. Any of you have any issues? Look good to you? Jeff or Jeff?
I do have one question, and that's for number 1, about units larger than 6 tons shall discharge to a sanitary sewer or storm drain. No other options?
Well, let's scroll up to the beginning portion. Let's make sure we got all this correct. Let's show all of 307.2.1. So condensate drain disposal from all cooling coils evaporator shall be conveyed from the drain pan to an approved place of disposal. So that's where you building officials get to, you know, use your magic word approved. As listed 1, 2, and 3 shall maintain a minimum slope. So that is and this is an Oregon amendment that's been here for a while.
So would it not be allowed to discharge if the unit was at grade? It wouldn't be allowed to discharge at grade. It would have to go to a storm or sanitary sewer?
That is the way it is reading, is larger units either need to go to and I guess storm sewer drain, would that include a roof drain? Under your reading.
And just to clarify, Mark, the language that we're seeing in underline is current code in Oregon?
This is all the blue of the 1, 2, and 3 are current Oregon code, and those were Oregon amendments that have been, that date back
forever,
probably close to 20 years now. So, and re-examining these are something that we could look at to clarify where items can go to, and to the
I mean, wondering about Jeff's question on option 1. I'm wondering if a 6-ton unit produces enough condensate that if it's drained to grade, it becomes a nuisance. That would be a motivator for that language. Just from the water volume.
So to this group, is this where this appears to be something we might want to reconsider to take to the board, whether just the model code of just not. I guess what they were looking for was a little more clarity on approved so that there was a general understanding. Going to the Wayback Machine here, that what are some general ideas of what an approved would be, so that between jurisdictions approved, some weren't allowing you to, and it's just some of that description of what might be a nuisance to take some of that vagueness out of it to say one or the other. Jeff, can you think of some things that we might want to?
Well, I was just wondering, I know you don't want it running over a sidewalk or whatever, but depending on what it's in, I mean, you could have a huge warehouse that may have that, and wouldn't it be allowed to discharge to grade if it didn't cross a sidewalk or street?
Okay. Would you be open to changing the first one to the units larger than 6 tons nominal capacity shall discharge to a sanitary sewer drain, storm sewer drain, or other approved location at grade, or just to maybe give you a little bit, have some review, but
Yeah, I think options are good.
yeah. In other words, having that, just not cutting off all of the, I see how this does potentially corner you on your interpretation. So,
And then I did have one other question on 30711 identification. Is a Sharpie okay?
Determination.
that sounds like your approval on this one. I don't think we have enough clarity here, and we could maybe ask we have an ICC person here, whether they know what the intent was at the national level. Rich, are you available to maybe give some feedback on 307.1.1 on the identification and what the intent was for that?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I was trying to get my mute button to come up. I apologize for the delay. The intention, if you look at the code proposal, I believe was just to make sure that we're identifying which one of those is the primary and secondary drain, so that it's readily visible to the occupants when the primary is stopped up. I do agree with the statement that it would be kind of up to the building official's interpretation of what they would accept for that. But there was no requirements to say, a permanent sign, anything like that. I don't know if that helps or just adds to the confusion.
No, that provides the where we are with this, and it looks like, yes, the marking that would be clear to the building official would be how we would look at that, I would assume. So, unless
the alternative would be to say labeled to indicate, which would suggest something more than just a marker. But if a marker cuts it, hey. And back on item or option one, I was going to say I support the notion of adding or approved location to give the code official some latitude there. Yeah.
So to the committee, let's start with this first on maybe getting some clarity about the, larger ones. Is this language acceptable to everyone on the committee? Jeff, yay, Nate, okay.
I'm good on it. Yeah,
All
it's always been clear to me.
So we're good with that. And then as for the new language of 307.2 1.1, it looks like this is really just making sure people can identify and that you can clearly know when your inspectors are out there which one is which one and where it's coming out. So just knowing the number of different ways this can happen, this is going to be your inspector's call, it looks like, on that one. And then, so now down to our one big matrix item in chapter 3 about
Mark, can I stop you really quick?
Yes.
Sorry, but this is an example of what I'm going to bust in with the change for the or other approved location there for the non-technical person, which is me. Does that open up less expensive options for someone that's doing this? Is that like I'm prying about the fiscal impact, which is going to happen again and again? Do you think this will create any cost savings, cost increases, anything like that?
From the chief's view, it's more a clarity issue of
Okay.
what has been happening in the field. I would say to the building officials, it's probably been that, although it could be called a potential cost savings or clarification. Jeff?
I really don't see a whole lot of cost increase or decrease. I mean, it just seems pretty basic and straightforward to me.
All right. Thank you both.
So to the 307.2.1.1 about the condensate discharge, this really is an alignment just to make sure that you aren't violating the plumbing code on how you connect things and make on your indirect connections to. So to the group, are you good with, is this a good clarification to have in the code? Are we good with that one, or do you want to modify or reject? So let's just look and see if everybody's good with it. Yes or no? We have 1 thumbs up, 2. And we need in the camera, Jeff.
You got it.
Okay, so we have a 3-0 on that one. So we'll just make that note. Any other notes at this time, or are we ready to move on?
Seems good.
Good. Yeah. That's so.
It's always great to start with the easier chapters. So, and Jeff, thank you for that note for the other clarity, just to avoid those extra questions down the line of can I approve going to great. So is anyone, just anyone, if there are any other issues or things you'd like to look at in chapter 3, we've tried to make sure that we get things that have to, of course, to do with just the fire code. We take some of those pieces out. We're addressing other parts later when it comes to chapter 5 and hazardous exhaust. And yeah, we take out all of 310, all of 311, and when it comes to load calculations, of course, you always have ability to look at other design criteria, but we don't sub-reference to the I code here when it comes to load calculations. We stay within the mechanical code for sizing your equipment. So with that, people okay with moving on to chapter 5? Hearing no further discussion, let's move on to exhaust systems. So if on our matrix, one item here, and that there's also a proposal about this later, but the very first item would like to show is item 5. Oh, let's stay up in 501. And this always gets to be a fun item about what has to be an independent system. They're finally clarifying that, of course, 501 starts with exhaust for environmental air being, independent of other exhaust systems. But environmental air exhaust includes dryers and domestic kitchen exhaust. So one thing that they're noting in the second sentence is that dryer exhaust does need to be independent of other environmental exhaust, such as bathroom exhaust, and that the domestic kitchen exhaust needs to be independent of those. And also clarifying, yes, that hazardous exhaust needs to be independent of any other system. So you can't combine kitchens with bathroom exhaust. You can't combine dryers with bathroom exhaust. You can't, please don't combine dryers with hazardous exhaust. And so just one of those clarifications that it's taken about 3 or 4 goes at set item, the scope and the independent system language to finally get that clarified. This is just a little clarification on that. And so we'll move really to one of the, okay, we'll keep going, Laura. We are at 502.20.1 is on manicure and pedicure station exhaust. Oregon, one of the first states to, set up the requirement for the exhaust from manicure stations. And of course, we know the building officials have always had the comments of, well, I'm using clean nail polish. Do I really have to do this? And how do I set these up? It's in the model code now. The one item here is that the exhaust for those mani-pedi stations need to have controls that operate the system continuously when the space is occupied. So some people have had them where they don't turn them on. It's really to say that when the building's occupied, you need to be running these exhaust systems, which really aligns with standard operation of most exhaust systems. It's having some sort of interlock or whatever to make sure that when the building's open for business, that you do run the pedicure exhaust so that you're getting those fumes from the nail operations. That's a model code change. This likely would have a potential cost impact on it because it potentially triggers some, interlocks with the occupied setting of the thermostat or a building time clock or an occupancy sensor or something to make sure that this is working. I think they might have had some discussion at model level about making sure that this ran, people were just turning them off and, you're still filling up the building with, or your neighboring tenants with a lot of, those odor complaints that I think a few of you have been through in the past. So any discussion from the committee members on this, or?
I mean, it strikes me that a light or just a power switch could constitute a control that operates the system continuously. I'm not reading this to say that you have to have an interlock, which is fine. I mean, but I don't know if that was the intent, was that there's some sort of occupancy interlock. Well, no, I guess, no, I take that back. It says the controls that operate the system. That's different than a manual switch. Okay.
So this is something that would turn it on automatically is
right.
How I would be reading this.
Yeah, I agree.
that during
think-
occupied hours, it turns on. There's not an override for off there.
So that could be a time clock or something as well, right?
Could be a time clock, could be interlocked with thermostat, building controls, a occupancy sensor. But Jeff?
So what's the worry here? Are they worried that the people are just aren't using them and they want to make sure that they're being used? Is that what we're getting from this?
I think that's what we're getting from this is sort of like,
Because that's, all that should be in the calculations for the whole building, correct? As far as balancing?
yes. So yes, on the code significance, it's saying that,
So not using it would be kind of maybe getting a positive pressure to where it's not working correctly. And
so they're showing I'm sort of seeing two reasons. One is they forget to turn it on, and number two is they forget to turn it off.
turn
when they
off.
leave. So it's sort of a double.
So what do you think the impact would be on something like that as far as cost? I guess is the question. So.
So that's where I wish one of the our contractor was here, but there are a few options, to be able to discuss how they might do options, whether it's some relays and interlocks, whether
Sure, they just automatically turn on, right? I get it.
or
You can-
have something that so they could either do a connector to some relays with the thermostat, building control system. You could have an occupancy sensor in there.
Absolutely, yeah,
that
I
would
agree.
Click it. So, but there's a little bit of cost involved with this one. I don't know for the building officials whether there's an impact to you on this or not.
What's the complaint? How much are the complaints? I mean, is it big? Obviously, they're trying to put this in here, so.
Mhm.
I mean, a digital programmable time clock is pretty cheap these days. If it came to that. I know that adds up with labor and markup and everything, but
So Andy, to where the other committees were looking at costs, would this just potentially be saying there's a potential cost of construction but as necessary for indoor air quality and saving energy?
Well, like Kevin, you mentioned that the timer clock is pretty cheap. What's pretty cheap? Like, are we talking in the $10 to $20 range, or what are we talking?
yeah, like $20 to buy, to install and everything would be, there's labor and material associated with that.
By the time you get through the subcontractors, probably 150.
Well, markup, yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Once you're all said and done.
All right.
So probably less than $200. That's just a hip shot. Do you need an actual number, Andy?
No. The committee's expertise is what we're looking for here. So I appreciate it, and it's just sort of the closer I can get to an actual number, or the closer I can get to an estimate of a number, the better off I am. But the like less than $200 with product and labor is a pretty good number there. And then what I'll do on my end is try and get an idea of how many nail salons we're talking about in Oregon.
And it would be more per station probably.
Sorry?
There would be, depending on the type system used, that might be a cost per station.
Oh.
Where, so each If it's a central fan system, it's pretty simple. If they have the ones where you've got a fan per nail station,
Correct.
you then have to get another electrical run and another drop. So there's a range possible. Just
Okay. Good.
I have a hand raise, Rich Anderson.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the committee that code proposal was M35-18 submitted by Guy McMahon, and he was representing the Colorado Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. The reason statement: measures need to be taken that will prevent exhaust systems from being turned off after the inspection process over. There are some 200,000 nail salons in the US employing some 375,000 people. Some of the chemicals employed, I don't want to read it verbatim, but they're in the affordability impact statement. The cost change proposal will increase the cost of construction. And then there's a note, this could possibly increase the cost that would take some coordination to interlock the power sources with maybe lights or some other automatic way of turning on the system. There was no prescriptive way to do it within the code proposal. If that helps the committee, I don't know.
thank you for your feedback. Anyone else?
I mean, that does add the public safety element to this. It's not just about energy. It's also about ventilation.
So to the committee first, are we good with adding this, or thumbs up or thumbs down? Let's see where people are. We have a 2 up and a,
Yeah, I'm gonna go up on that one.
okay. All right.
I'm gonna go up.
Okay. Are we good with moving on then at this point? Andy, we have enough that we can have a general on statement for right now. Next one, let's go to termination of dryer duct exhaust. So some residential dryer MIIs do list termination locations and, you know, might have different from that. Of course, a lot of this, the residential dryer information relies on their listing and how they've looked at their setup for their particular dryers. Some can move air farther. Some have differences in what they want for their, you know, little discharge opening, but they're getting pretty consistent on that. This is stating that, you know, when the MII don't have a specific termination location, that they need to be not less than 3 feet in any direction from openings into the building, including openings in ventilated soffits, because certain we've all been out and probably seen a dryer duct that went right up into somebody's residential attic vent. But this is to help clarify that. I believe some manufacturers actually tell you to be even further, even lower, just like for some of the, what is this? Condensing furnaces, you know, they have some, everything's relying on their MII now, and some, you know, have specific instructions to make sure that, you know, the water vapor doesn't go back into the building. So this is really, from my view, sort of a clarification on that you can use the MII, and when it doesn't have a specific restriction, you need to be at least 3 feet from where the dryer ventilation might go back into the building. Any discussion from the group, or?
Seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Everybody?
I'm good with it.
Some thumbs, one direction or the other. All right. Thank you.
What about the booster fan
Well, let's go back.
prohibition?
Oh, this is significant.
Yeah, it is. Because it used to be UL 705.
Oh, this one is, I think this is in a different from the UL 70. So there's a 504.5 up above. So we still have dryer exhaust duct power systems to the UL 705. I think this sounds like a belt and suspenders to say, don't put in.
There's no random fans.
So they're eliminating.
You can still use the power boosters, but not a power ventilator, but not a.
It's like those duct circulator booster fans for HVAC that's a little too weak.
As code officials, do you see a problem with having this in 504.5 as well?
I guess I wonder if is it needed? It seems like 0.5 covers it. Because you have to have a listed UL 705 fan for a booster. Nothing else is allowed, right?
Pretty much. I mean, and then also most of those dryers nowadays will run just 105 feet. So
Yeah, I just had one at the high school though that was about 185 feet.
Whoa.
yeah. So I mean,
Wow.
why would you, other than commercial, need a domestic booster fan?
I mean, I suppose it doesn't hurt, but it caught my eye because I'm like, wait, no booster fan? So, but upon reading, it's like, okay, I get it.
So any objections to this, or?
I guess, are they just looking for clarification? Obviously. I mean, it clearly states it has to be domestic dryer exhaust ventilator instead of a booster fan.
Right.
I guess people don't understand that and they want more clarification.
Seems superfluous, but as long as 504.5 is in there, I don't see whether we're going to have a, so.
I don't see the issue.
Choose whether it's a no harm, no foul, or whether you'd like to do something about that.
I don't think it hurts.
I guess it doesn't hurt. And when you put it that way, it doesn't hurt. I mean, if anybody needs clarification, there it is.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is something that we've had. It's an organ amendment that's been kind of significant in the mechanical officials the last time around and the board about domestic duct installation. There were, in the model code, they had gone with duct shall not be joined with screws or fasteners that protrude more than 1/8 inch into the inside of the duct. So they were thinking about, maybe some shorter pop rivets, short screws, but a lot of people were, just to give some background, they were uncomfortable with having to try and figure out hidden inside of the duct, is that really 1/8 inch or more protruding into the duct? That's why this was struck the last time. It's an organ amendment that we've not had the path for, putting in a sheet metal screw or a pop rivet, because everyone was trying to figure out, well, how do we verify this is really just 1/8 of an inch in, or less than 1/8, no more than 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah, it seems prudent to me.
Well, it takes out the question for sure,
That
whether you
was-
can use them or not. Yeah.
So the question to the group, continue with this organ amendment since it was a significant one.
Yeah, I think if folks have figured out how to make the joining process without screws, they can
I-
continue to do so,
that's-
right?
That's what I'm seeing in the field. So, I mean, I don't see a problem with it.
So we'll continue with that one. Let's go
Yep.
on. So on the transition duct, this is one thing where we don't look at and inspect that, when you install the dryer the first time, when you install the dryer that's being done after, where you're looking at, the building officials are looking at the installation to the connection point. So that transition from the dryer to the actual constructed dryer duct, we don't see that. Where the dryer manufacturers will have it in their installation instructions when you put this in after the C of O is done. They'll say to use the UL dryer duct connector. Please don't use the flammable plastic ones. Maybe one day the big box stores won't sell it anymore, or be able to get it delivered via certain online places. But that's this is dividing out where the installation of the appliance, portable appliance versus the code, was why this was adjusted and passed. Any heartburn with? Ready to move on? Yay, nay?
Yeah.
Okay. Next item on is what, 505.3. And this is really aligning with chapter 4. The I1 and I2s do have mechanical ventilation for their cooking appliances for those locations. That's one location where we do want the, have a hood there for them to continue to take out the, no options for doing natural ventilation for domestic appliances in an I1 or I2. Really want to be able to exhaust that out. That's just a minor past modification. Any heartburn continuing that?
Let me just bust in again for a second here, and same basic question I'm gonna be asking all day. Does removing natural ventilation as an option create costs for anyone, or like are the other options that you would be required to use more expensive?
This, real quick, Andy, this was an existing one. So
Okay.
This is just continuing and existing. So this is not a new. So
Then don't mind me.
and same with this is just continuing a past allowance. This gets to Laura, was this a past? I don't believe. I want to make sure on this 505 point.
Let's look. Yeah.
It's 505 point. We have removed this in the past.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Oh, I believe this had to do with a just sort of a redundancy. It's covered elsewhere in the code. So you had what we're in currently is domestic. In 505 is domestic cooking exhaust equipment. And when we get to, it's actually covered later in code. I believe it is 507 point. It is 507.1.2 domestic cooking appliances used for commercial purposes. That's the language where we get into that. Remember that single residential, or if you could scroll down to 507.1.2 just to show. This is where we get into state of Oregon does its own modification about that. When there's somebody in an office is putting in a break room, a stove in a break room, or small use fire station, places like that, where we've got domestic use of a domestic cooking appliance and being able to use a domestic hood. We cover it here where we're in 507.1.2 domestic cooking appliances used for commercial purposes. Well, we're in commercial. 505.1 was for dwelling units and residential use. Here we're in what happens when you put it in the non-dwelling unit space for a range, a stove, or some piece like that you can have them. And you can install them as a domestic cooking exhaust system, say, residential range hood can be done with some limitations. This is where the building officials get used to seeing this. People are saying, yes, we're going to use it we're going to cook on weekends. We're going to do it for our potlucks at the church. And they document it to the building officials that that's going to be the use for that hood, or for that commercial cooking appliance, or that domestic cooking appliance in a building, and it's going to use this exception. We're not going to put in a type 1 hood in our little church or fire station or employee lunchroom. Here's our exception for that. And then we've had most building officials ask for, okay, they put it in their file that this is what we're going to do with it. And so that if they suddenly turn around and have turn it into a commercial operation where they're cooking daily, or 200 suddenly going from potlucks to 200 meals a week, that you can have, that's not meeting how they did their permit. So that last piece was just, it's a deletion to allow to just put the domestic cooking hoods for commercial purposes, for non-domestic purposes, out here in 507.1.2. I know that was not the best explanation, but I hope you understood that one. It's just to eliminate a redundancy, putting it in the place where it's more appropriate. So there are going to be times where domestic cooktop range or open top broiler might need to be commercial. That's the other reason for getting this, is there are going to be times where they're going to use it for a commercial purpose that isn't appropriate for underneath a residential range hood. So that's why we're taking care of that language here. So
yeah, I think that's a better way to go than what's stated in 505.6, because that's an open door.
Everyone good with that? Maintaining current amendment? All right. let's move on to 506.3.2.5, unless there are other items you want to go over. And in Oregon, we've the mechanical officials have liked for the grease duct test to either do light test or another approved equivalent method sometime. There are methods out there that include sort of so they sort of put a pressure washer down inside the duct and spray to the side, see if you get leakage out. Other than just a light test, this is making it a little easier on both the providing options to let the building official approve a different test method for grease duct leakage. That's the main purpose here. It just gives you guys more flexibility in the field. Any questions on that past Oregon amendment or? Good to go? Grease duct slope. For those super long grease duct runs, there's been a requirement for a sort of trap clean out in the duct. A lot of these longer grease ducts, of course, nowadays are these new manufactured, factory fabricated ones, and their clean outs are a little different than the standard. You're assuming you're welding a nice big rectangular duct for 30 feet horizontally. These manufacturers of the prefab that, are fire rated, whole 9 yards, have their own clean out version. This exception is allowing them to do their clean out version for, clean outs and traps in accordance, and it's for the listing of the manufacturer's equipment. So that seems like another option to allow, if it's a listed grease duct system, to allow them to use the slope that's in their listing. Any discussion from the group or good to go on that? Yay, nay?
Like it.
Smoker ovens. I've had a lot of calls on this one in the past. Thank you, Laura. You can bring up the smoker ovens with integral exhaust and how we treat some of these. There's now a new exception of smoker ovens from being under a type 1 hood when they have an integral listed exhaust system to them. This has been, we've always had these questions of what happens with these. It's an odd, for what goes under a type 1 hood, it's one of those things that's sort of it's a square peg for a round hole. How does it fit in there? They now have listed units that have integral exhaust from them that allow them to not be under a type 1 or type 2 hood. And there was always a question whether or not they were grease producing. Well, they sure produce smoke, and a lot of grease does build up in the bottom of them, but if they have their own integral system, this is one of those pieces where they can go to the exterior on their own. There's the new language. This is sort of like the pizza oven issue we had in the past. It's designed to contain it. It's got the wood burning on it. It's got its own way of venting it. Putting a hood over something that's all self-contained, it's not going to exhaust anything from it because the doors are closed all the time. But again,
So just for my own education, an integral exhaust system on a smoker means there's a separate duct or pipe that goes to the outdoors for the smoke.
yes,
And so the type 1 hood is just for heat, really?
well, a type 1 is normally intended to grab smoke, grease that's being
Excuse me,
released from.
type 2, sorry.
Yeah, type 2 is mostly for moisture and heat. Yes.
Okay. Seems reasonable.
Anything from the building official folks on this? Okay, next. All right. So we're back to that last issue. I think we settled this one about our organ, what we try and do. This helps you when you deal with those people who need to just put in a small, stove or something for domestic type operation, allowing some flexibility for that break room, but also giving you some ability to look at these afterwards. There was one instance where a local jurisdiction, their Greece police, found out that there was a lot coming from a certain location that had said they were just going to be an employee break room, but they were cooking for a preschool of like 50 meals 3 times a day, and wasn't what they had on their original permit application. So that's the type. Allowing that flexibility, but giving you the ability to address that in future. Next item is, so I'm assuming we're good with that since we accepted the other change. Collectors and separators under 511.1.1. And this is a lot to do with the woodworking shops and the like, on making sure this is really an alignment to make sure that when we're looking at dust collection systems, if you'll scroll up, these are in the exceptions. Oh, whoa. Oregon has had an exception to allow small systems to not do the full meal deal for wood dust collection with up to 5 dust producing appliances, and also noting that it's installed in accordance with the building code, the electrical code, and approved by you, the building official. These are, like for those small wood workshops, to avoid full-on explosion relief, but making sure that it is installed per our building code and the electrical code. So this is for an approved system to do a little bit more flexibility on those small woodworking locations. Just a long-standing Oregon amendment that's the last code cycle got cleaned up a little bit more to make sure it was clear on how many drops or appliances you could connect to in a woodworking shop. Give you a minute to mull that over, but if you'll, Laura, if you can scroll down to just the start of this and the 2.1 on this as well. What Oregon did in the past was there was an exception for independent systems shall be permitted to be installed indoors, provided that all of the following. I believe Oregon added a few extra pieces of this. We're limiting it to, so you could have 3 small dust collection systems, each serving no more than 5 appliances each is the real intent. So you can have a small one for corner A of a woodworking shop, one for corner B, and one for corner C. That and just making sure that our alignment is with the electrical code, and the construction portions aren't in the fire code. We now have brought those into the building code. Any heartburn on this one or discussion from the group? We're good to go on that? All right. And last one is a new additional on energy recovery ventilation systems. I'm looking for this. Oops. It's striking out the word. You can now do, you're now allowed to do energy recovery systems on type 2 kitchen systems. It's still prohibited on type 1, unless you have a specific listing or something special on that on the ERV. There are a few that can potentially do type 2, but this is saying that if you have a type 2 hood in a kitchen, really it's dealing with heat and moisture. That's all it should be going up through it. You're now allowed, when it's potentially listed for that service, you can do a heat recovery unit on type 2 water system. So you could actually do it on the dishwasher hood. A lot of heating off of that. It's not prohibiting that anymore. So any discussions? Okay, nay. Wait. Yep. Okay to move on? Great, we're on. Oh, does anyone need a break? Maybe 5-minute, 10-minute break, or are we good to keep rolling on this? Asking the committee members. We get some okays? All right. We will roll through in chapter 6. We'll go to 602.2.1.8, pipe and duct insulation within plenums. So the way the code had been written was talking about you pretty much could wrap anything in. So there are a lot of insulations that are plenum rated, and you could wrap a plastic pipe in any plenum rated insulation, and that would get you out of having to, that would allow you to do 2550 fire smoke rated pipe in a plenum. They've done a clarification now that they now have some pipe insulations that are actually listed to provide that protection. So that's really the intent of this new one, is that there are pipe insulations available that are intended to go, that are listed to provide the 2550 equivalents around, say, let's say an ABS or let's say a PVC pipe. You could now wrap it in specifically listed pipes that they do show a little UL label on some of them, pipe insulation now, that are for meeting this requirement. So you just, it's really a clarification on that now that they have tested insulation to wrap these plastic pipes, is that there are specific ones that you can use now.
So Mark, is it still like Armaflex is okay?
If it has the, I haven't checked that particular brand yet. So Armaflex is still okay to wrap a non-flammable pipe. Using Armaflex to get a PVC pipe into a plenum, if that pipe, or getting a pipe that doesn't meet the 2550, you used to be able to wrap it with a plenum rated insulation and you were done. Now, to wrap pipe, it has to have been tested that, yeah, it does work for that. And I just checked one manufacturer just out of the blue, and yeah, they do have a little UL in the bottom that they're okay for that. I don't know about that one particular, didn't check that particular brand yet. So. That clarify where things are on. So this might have a small cost impact. I haven't checked all of the different brands, such as you noted, to make sure all of them work for this currently. But Are people okay with that?
I think it makes it a little bit clearer. So yeah.
All right. Well, then with that, we'll move on to. Oh. Our committee last go round has been maintaining an older table for dwelling unit duct construction metal thickness. It keeps some of the smaller ducts a little thicker. It was getting to, they were a little concerned last go round. I think it was almost all the way to 30 gauge for some smaller duct, and for long-term construction of a, condo or dwelling unit, they wanted to see that it was a little bit like 1 gauge size thicker, so they retained that level. If you can look down below, the strikeout is and it's also based on having, for you, the designer, to look at ducts over 1 inch water gauge construction versus 1/2 inch and what was in between. It also keeps the table a little simpler for designers and the building official to look at as well. And I think some of it also was the aluminum was getting really thin at one point as well, was the other thing of concern. But this is just a carry through from the last code, just making you aware of what was done the last time around and seeing whether there's any like to re-examine current model code or retain past organ amendment is the question.
I like it.
Jeff?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, we'll roll along. Duct penetration of fire barriers. Where are we here? Or is that? This is one that, yes, always bothered me as a designer and trying to tell people about this. There's been an allowance for, you're in a large building with tenants. You hit a 1 hour penetration. If you're maintaining metal, it says, the code used to say metal duct for the whole system. So that meant from the air handler all the way to the discharge grill in a tenant. If it was metal the entire distance, you could avoid a fire damper where you crossed a 1 hour wall. And the return duct also had to be metal all the way back. This is clarifying that, yes, you can have a flexible connection back to the air handler. So that was making it very hard to do, because some bigger air handlers, they have for noise and vibration and be able to disconnect, they have a flexible connection there. That was preventing them from using this exception or this methodology to not have a fire damper. And also they are now noting that there is the ability to have a flex connector to a ceiling diffuser on the other side. So as long as you've got the 26 gauge metal going through the penetration, and really everything is metal until you get to you can have some flex at the start back at the air handler. You can have some flex at the last drop to a ceiling diffuser, but you're looking at, when you're talking about a fire at a 1 hour penetration, how long does it take to get through either the 26 gauge duct on one side and break out on the other side versus going through the wall does it matter that there's a flex drop, say 12 to 20 feet away? This is providing a little more flexibility. It is it's relaxing the standard for having that 26 gauge duct through a firewall, or excuse me. I want to make sure I get my notation right, whether it's a fire partition. But
So theoretically, that could be 2 feet past the rated partition then, right?
that is non-metallic flexible connections that connect ductive and air handling equipment within the machinery room, non-metallic flexible air connectors in accordance with 603 point that connect an overhead diffuser. So yes, it can be could be within 2 feet. Yes, the way this.
Good.
Yeah. Would you be interested? Minimum of, from way back for me in the Southern Building Code, there was like a 6 foot or something like that many years ago.
Obviously, this is for a fire barrier, not a smoke barrier. It's just a separate section, so. I mean, is there any analysis on this for smoke or fire propagation?
I believe there was a recognition that the 26 gauge provided that fire protection, but yes, how far on either side is a potential question to the group.
Well, it'd definitely be a concern for me. I mean, you could have a piece of flex connected to the ductwork just on the other side of the wall.
Any discussion or recommendations or?
Does ICC have any input on that one?
I'm just going over the model code, and if the intention, I believe, is to just allow flexible connectors that connect to a duct and air handling unit located in the mechanical room, or a non-metal flexible connector in accordance with 603.6.2, connecting to a diffuser or the metal duct are located within the same room, it's already within the exceptions in the model code. And what I'm looking at is the model code. 607.5.2 on my CDP access, or on my digital code premium, under the exceptions under number 3, 3.1 and 3.2 is what I'm looking at. And that's in the model code.
Could you repeat that one so that our.
So under 607.5.2, exception 3, 3.1 and 3.2 are in the model code. So I don't know why they're a different color here, but they are in the model code pretty much. You've got some added language. No, I don't think so. So that 3.1 and 3.2 are within the model code as listed exceptions. It's possible that, I don't know the history as well as all of you, but you may have added this charging statement at the end to maybe clarify 3.1 and 3.2.
I'm bringing up the red line on my screen just to check this out. 50.
Oh, wait, now I'm reading it now. The flexible air connector is permitted fully ducted system limited to the following installations is what the model code says. And that was added to the end of number 3 exception. You see that there?
Right.
And I just wonder if the model code now is in line with what your previous amendments had.
I think I just accidentally made them purple.
Okay.
I
Okay.
went crazy with the purple.
Really, this is now aligning with the
Yeah, just aligning with model code.
Yeah, right. Well, that
But
is the last
that-
sentence is new for 20.
Yeah, that often happens when local or state agencies make amendments that make sense. They often make its way to the model code a couple of cycles later, right?
So Laura, if we can get those sentences back into.
Yeah, I can fix it. But we're going to accept this, right?
Well, the 3.1 and 3.2 would be listed as black
Mhm.
or
Yeah, we have highlighted would stay purple, right?
that would be quote new 2021 language. Trying to find that. So this did come in. The 3.1 and 3.2 were in the 2018, but the I want to make sure of this. So Laura, I'm opening up the because the fully ducted had always been a problem for past. Laura, on 607 point. Trying to get the, excuse me, the section number from the 2018, so I can align this.
My 2018 book does not have 3.1 or 3.2 in it.
That's, I think, yeah, we're talking about, this is a,
I will say it's possible that we got it wrong in the publication I'm reading.
Yeah. It's new. Okay, so yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure, yeah, because that is purple, Laura. This is all new. So can we scroll back up to our number here, 607.5.
4.
7.5.2.
Two.
Yeah, so we are here, exception 3. Yeah. So, yes, so the way the current language was that, yes, it just for the purposes of this exception, a ducted HVAC system, needed to be constructed of at least 26 gauge from the air handling appliance to the air outlet or inlet terminals. So this was really hard to understand and enforce in the past. That's what I know. I've had calls on this now. And this new exception really does say where flexible air connectors are allowed. And that is back at the air handler and for the final connector to a ceiling diffuser, as long as they're located in the same room. So you can't use a flexible air duct to go cross a room partition line. So that's where we are on this. We did get it right. So the question is, A, whether this is acceptable or whether you'd like to see something maybe about a minimum length once you've crossed a 26 gauge duct once you're on either side of the wall before hitting any flex connectors. I think that's kind of, if I'm reading, that was one of Jeff's questions, really. Sorry, Jeff T. Anything? Do we look at this, or are we okay with it as is, or are you wanting to?
So it could come through the partition 3 inches, and then a flexible connector could connect to the diffuser after that.
That's how that's reading, yes.
And Jeff T, you're muted.
Well, that was my concern is what, are we going to actually have some kind of standard or are they just going to be able to connect the flex connector an inch away from the wall? I mean, are we going to, because most of the times when I did flex connectors, they were underneath the unit just after the drop. So.
We could.
And I'm just visualizing this, you could have a flex duct out of a wall on one side, but everything upstream is going to be fully ducted until it gets to that mechanical room.
Just for clarification, Kevin, a flexible air connector is different than a flexible duct.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So this would only apply to flexible air connectors.
Oh, you're right.
Okay. let's go to 603.6.2 so we can,
Right. I get
see
you.
how much of a limit that is on. Well, that has a, so 603.6.2 flexible layer connectors, UL 181, but the limit is 14 feet.
Yep.
For a connection to a diffuser. So that's on the screen right now, top left, 603.6.2.1. Trying to see whether so the building officials and Kevin, any,
I mean, is there such a thing as a fire resistant flexible duct connector?
UL 181, it's 2550. How about that? That's flame and smoke. Right? So
Yeah.
that's how
Oh.
long it lasts.
Well, if this was adopted at the national level, there must have been some thought about that. Hopefully, people
One-
aren't too worried about it.
Obviously, yes, I guess so.
So at least one side of the wall will have 26 gauge for, you know, a significant length or substantive fact to this. So it would have to burn. Let's consider you're going to go through the duct or into the plenum. You're going to burn the flex, but it still has to get through the 26 gauge opening or metal through the wall and then back out the other side. Is that significant? Does that serve as enough 1 hour to be the equivalent to the 1 hour protection elsewhere of 2 layers of rock or 1 layer of rock on each side? How about, or the fire portion?
Yeah, there's a little heartburn with it, but I think basically it's okay.
Okay. All right. And for now, thumbs up. We can still, nothing prohibits coming back and discussing at the next meeting. So, but for now, we're going to call that moving on. No heartburn. Let's go to subducting at shafts. They are just, I believe, just making sure that what the subduct, we've all been familiar with the 22-inch subduct issue for a while. It's clarifying that, yes, the thickness of the material you use to create your subduct has to be the same, should probably be at least the same or better than 26 gauge, you know, or what you're building the shaft out of, or your vertical duct out of. And clarifying about the kind of like the additional language in here about the exhaust fan at the top being clear that that needs to run per 909.11 to maintain the continuous flow upward. Just avoids having to do a lot of interpretation of how to get to section 909.11. So that looks good, but asking the group anything group would like to add or.
That seems like a good clarification.
Right. Ventilation air distribution, 608.1. There we go, on balancing, putting in some language that has kind of been in and out through the years about having the method to actually adjust the system, making sure that, and giving, of course, through an approved method, back to the building officials again, ventilation, air distribution shall be balanced by an approved method, and the balancing shall verify that it's capable of supplying and exhausting the outdoor airflow rate. So we've had the bit about making sure people had a ventilation schedule for their outdoor air on the plans normally for bigger buildings, smaller ones, probably just part of, say, the small local system. Giving a little bit more for you to have the method you want to see for showing that they have balanced the ventilation air to make sure that we're getting the proper outdoor air. Just. Oh. Any questions on this back in the code for a little extra? There's a little bit in that can be pointed to in the administrative, but this is adding a little extra for the designers to see some minimum they need to provide to the building official and the contractors when they're in the field. Any heartburn? We got, looks like, by the way, I like seeing 3 heads go like this. Nothing in chapter 7. In 8, we have 801.21. And we have a lot in the gas code about looking at gas appliances have a blocked vent shut off. It has now been added that oil-fired appliances, still might see some occasionally, that they have to have a venting obstruction switch that requires manual reset as well, just like gas appliances. About the only thing I'm hearing about these days are some of these, waste oil fuel burners, and I think DEQ might be putting a halt to those at some point. But if there is a fuel oil appliance, they need a blocked vent switch as well. All right.
Seems reasonable. That would obviously add cost.
I haven't had a chance to check and see what appliances are still out there and whether they are putting them in now as part of their listings or not, but potential small cost on that one, but I would imagine most. So we can do a little more research on that if you'd like. But there is a potential cost, Andy, so we need to note that one. But given the number that we have in the state, people are migrating away from fuel oil, just given all the other issues. But all right, ready to move to chapter 9, solid fuel burning appliances. This gets to another thing aligning with our work with Oregon DEQ. Those little wood burning, they're not boilers, they're little outdoor heaters that, they come in a little shed. They finally have EPA listings for those. DEQ has also recognized that now that they finalized their work on this. This is just clarifying to make sure that should someone put in one of these wood heaters, it does need to be EPA certified as well, but that also comes with our note, the little note box that DEQ will be looking at these as well. So nothing on anything on that one, just clarifying that there are currently EPA certifications finally. That was held up for something like 10 years. So oh, here's one for our building officials on unvented alcohol fuel burning decorative appliances. They now have these little decorative gas or alcohol fireplaces now have a UL listing and need to be installed in accordance with the listing, MII, and Chapter 3 for clearances to combustibles, of course. Any comments on these?
Have you been seeing any of these at all?
Had questions a few years ago on one, yes, because they've got the pretty glass rock and they want to have it in their bathroom to have a decorative appliance in there. Have had a couple of questions. It's been a few years because they didn't have a listing at that point, and it was sort of, well, I can't get you there currently, and you know, fuel burning appliances need to have a vent unless there's some other thing that goes with it, and here it is now. What we don't have in here is I've had questions from people who were looking to put in alcohol burning stoves from like a ship, you know, a sailboats. They were, you know, going off grid and wanted to have an alcohol stove. And of course, we don't have anything for that. But to be honest, I haven't had a question on one of these in a while. It's been a long time. But this is giving them, now that they've got listings for them, to allow their installation. Are you open to having anything on?
I think as long as it's listed and labeled, it should be fine.
Rest of the group? Okay. All right. We will move past large diameter ceiling fans to Chapter 10. Of course, we really do a lot to Chapter 10 to make it align with the boiler program. There is one item in here about, of course, the protection on water heaters and the fact that we have them in here where inapplicable with this code. We don't do much regulation on water heaters simply because we really get into it when there is a heating system off of a water heater. And that is done occasionally. We get into some of the pieces downstream, but the plumbing code will also deal with anything having to do with it. They'll sort of rule the roost where it's potable water, no matter what. That's in their program. If they have a heat exchanger that goes to a heating system, we get involved. As far as the protections, that gets back to really the structural code, where they look for any appliance to have protection. So really nothing else to look at on this one, simply because what happens is that the mechanical code will just pull in where we are applicable. When it comes to strapping and the like, the plumbing code handles most of this. The structural code, however, does get involved with protection. So really not much to look at in all of Chapter 10, simply because we just had it either falls within the plumbing program or the boiler program. We do pull in those things where downstream of the boiler, we can scroll down, Laura, just to let people know we've brought in those pieces that are not in the boiler program sometimes, such as, of course, we get into clearances with building code, the enclosures of the room aligning with the building code. But there are certain pieces such as expansion tanks and some of the pumps and safety relief pieces that can be outside of the boiler program. So we had to pull in as much as we could to make sure we still had coverage for. Boiler program draws a box around what they regulate. This is for those pieces that are outside of their box. So including drainage in the room. We wanted to make sure we had that. Vents are always in our world. The combustion air is always in our world, and we cover those. We have cross notes to where we get to that information. So that's there's really no action for 10 unless there are things that you wish to get to. So. Everybody open to go to refrigeration? All right, let's go to chapter 11. And as we go in here, the first piece here is a note, should have a note, it'll have a note box around it. If we zoom in a little bit, Laura, that the boiler program does get into some of the requirements, and there are some rules for brazing qualifications that have been in there for a while. We just need to put a note box, or there will be a note box around that first blue note you're seeing here. The biggest piece, if you look at item 11-1 throughout.
Hey, Mark, can I bust in here for just one second because I might have spaced out? Did we get was it a unanimous yes on 10-1 protection of water heaters?
I
know we moved on, but I either missed the confirmation or I glazed right over it. I just want to make sure.
I think this really winds up being a non-issue for us in that it's covered, it's really pointing to us via the structural code and what happens in the plumbing code, although we could, although the committee does need to give a this was really more an informational for the committee that the plumbing code has protection requirements. Just to go back to this section real quick, that they have the plumbing code only talks about protection of gas water heaters. The structural code in a parking deck, commercial parking lot, they want all appliances protected, whether it's a gas water heater, electric water heater, they have theirs. And so under, Laura, if you can go down to 10.02.1, this is sort of where applicable to we were trying to bring up that the plumbing code under this, where it's applicable to the manufacturer's installation, the plumbing code, and where applicable in this code, that the when we're talking about water heaters and the protection of this had to do with protection of water heaters, the plumbing code is only looking for gas water heaters. So we are saying we're applicable in this code and talking about the plumbing code is ruling on this, but we're applicable in this code. We're really looking at protection of water heaters. It's not an issue for us electric or gas water heaters here primarily, because the structural code is going to point to all water heaters and all furnaces, all unit heaters. They set a standard for outside of the plumbing code for protection of things in a parking lot. Either needs to be high enough so a car won't hit it, or protected from getting hit. So that's whether it's an electric unit heater, gas unit heater, all of these, everything needs protection. This probably didn't need to be on the list, but wanted to explain what that was and see whether the committee wanted to discuss in any more detail on that.
Looks good to me.
Okay.
All right. So one of the biggest items in the refrigeration is that instead of having separate notes about refrigeration, it relies solely on the IIAR regulations and their standard. It just sub-references the ammonia compliance books. So there will be fewer references to ammonia throughout. Where are we down here? Yeah, so that's it. Just seeing whether the group will, as we scroll through here, we'll show different spots where IAR came in and where notes about specific ammonia refrigeration room requirements left, that it's relying on those design standards found in the IIAR standards. So we can find some down through. I know there's some more. No, we still have some of these. This is new language for joints and connections. Well, oh, I think it's just saying they're going to defer to the entire IIAR suite of documents. So that's really where we're talking about refrigerants other than ammonia and coming back to 1101.1.2. One of the next, and so we may come back to this after we've gone through the entire chapter to item 11-1. But the next one is our current statewide alternate method 2101. Just want to go to section 11 or chapter, excuse me, matrix item 11-2 about refrigeration standards, which has to do with section 1103.1. And at the last one this year, as new refrigerants have been coming online, there's a rush to get new low carbon dioxide equivalent refrigerants out. And the way the code is written, if the refrigerant is not on the particular list that's printed in the IMC, it has to be approved by the building official for use. Some of the refrigerants are coming out quick enough that some of them are winding up in ASHRAE standards 15 and 34. So they've been tested. All of the IMC is based on standards 15 and 34 for safe refrigerants. ASHRAE's gone through that. They've worked with manufacturers. These are safe for use. Here's how much refrigerant you can have in the building. There may be refrigerants published in the ASHRAE standard that have gone through all that safety analysis and requirements, but they aren't published in your IMC codebook. The alternate is there, excuse me, that should have been silenced. What we've done is under refrigerant classification, if you can see here in section 1103.1 in our statewide alternate method was, we'll start with, 1102.2. Refrigerants not identified in ASHRAE standard 34 or in table 1103.1 need to be approved before use. So something really new. It's, say, currently under consideration at national level. They have to get your approval for that. However, if it is published in standard 34, as you'll notice in our past code book, we only had ASHRAE standard through 2016, excuse me. This allowed refrigerants that were published in ASHRAE standard 15-2019 and 34-2019 to be used. And so it allows the ASHRAE 34 tables to be used for compliance with Chapter 11 for classified refrigerants not included in the mechanical code table 1103.1. So I know I'm trying to make this clear, is that yes, sometimes those refrigerant tables will be, and by the time, let's see here, we're going to have an ASHRAE standard 15-22 published shortly during the time period that our new model, the new OMSC 2022 is going to be published, correct? While this is coming out, there's going to be a brand new published national standard that's looked at the safety of refrigerants and may have some refrigerants that aren't in our current table that have, and Laura, if you can show table 1103.1 and what that means. This is that table that says, here's how they're classified and the maximum quantity of pounds per 1,000 cubic feet that are allowed. All of these numbers came out of standard 34 and their safety look at. What it's allowing is that should 90 ASHRAE standard 34-22 come out, those would still, they could show you those in that table and comply with those. Because I believe we're adding 2 to 3 pages of new refrigerants per code cycle now, just simply because so many are coming out. And this just helps give you a bit of confirmation that it's gone through, you know, and the board went through this for the statewide alternate method and realized that, yes, in this push to get new refrigerants that can replace ones that are potentially harmful or whatever, there are other federal requirements to get new refrigerants out there. This is getting them able to be used faster and prevented from being used in a building. So what the question is really for you as the building official is, are they exceeding the safe amount to where they have to do a refrigeration machinery room? So when you're in a big grocery store, most likely you're past these levels for just about any refrigerant. Now you have to build, you know, the refrigeration machinery room. And this is really about the triggering for refrigeration machinery room. On these, to be able to allow you to do different and to show that those are safe refrigerants without having to come to you and ask each time, oh, wow, this is manufacturer X is now using refrigerant that's not on the table for all their, you know, mini splits or whatever. Did I make sense on that? That was the purpose of the statewide alternate method. What we wanted to bring to you is, would it be acceptable to you to potentially also look at, we either keep that statewide alternate method going or take it back to the board and say, yes, when 2022 comes out, can you use the latest version? Or can we go ahead and do it right now in the Oregon Mechanical Code 2022, just pre-priming that pump for the use of the ASHRAE standard 34-2022 and ASHRAE standard 15-2022. So not having to wait specifically for their publication date, knowing that there are going to be new refrigerants added.
So is the question mark whether that would just be rolled into the code directly, or otherwise it would be maintained as an alternate method?
The way the alternate method is done right now is it's saying it's changing the reference standard number.
Right.
We could, yes, say to them, please update, you know, we bring up alternate methods when we're there to the boards as well, recognizing the ones that are out there already. We wouldn't be able to change the reference year number yet, but we could maintain the current alternate method would pretty much do the same. Yeah. But whether or not you want to do this in a code change or just leave it to the board to continue to make the decision of maintaining the alternate method.
Gotcha.
But this is it's not an adopted amendment to the code yet. The question is, would it be up for consideration as adoption as a code amendment, or just leave that back to the mechanical board on looking at the alternate method? I believe that would be the official question to you.
I mean, keeping it as an alternate method is pretty clean. I'm wondering what heartache that or heartburn that causes for a project. Just a little bit of extra application, right? To get it approved, refrigerant approved.
I think if you kept the alternate method, that would allow more flexibility because we don't even know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe adopting the 2022, something else might come out at that point that we need to be able to look at in the future.
So take that as a recommendation to keep the SAM moving forward, no change in the book. Is what
That
I'm
makes
hearing.
makes sense to me.
Okay.
Because there could be a 22A that comes out the next year, right? If the refrigerants are really piling on.
Okay. So 1105.9, the language from the IBC for egress out of a boiler room has been added here. Normally, we would probably just say means of egress shall be maintained per the building code to avoid potentially having should the structural board decide to go differently to avoid those changes, but this is, and I don't know, Andy, whether or not they've gotten to the means of egress from boiler rooms or not in the structural board committee yet. So
Yes, they have.
okay. I was unable to follow that and find out whether or not they did anything with the language or
The language.
I apologize for not having that part ready for today. But they just had their meeting.
So since this is in the mechanical code, does that mean mechanical plans would have to indicate this? Kind of like access to equipment and things like that that are not strictly about the appliance, but access to it.
This is really on egress and egress methods and reminding, I guess, when people are designing their boiler rooms that they don't forget that the structural, this may be one of those things I believe that the architects may be forgetting about, that the that it's sort of a doubling down to make sure it's there.
I'm just thinking
But
in terms of process, this is in the mechanical code, so this is not something the architect is going to read. It's going to be the mechanical engineer or designer. And they're going to go, hey, architect, you need 2 exits.
Is it going to be mirrored in the building code?
I believe that's what Laura has brought up on the screen, 1006.2.2.1, which the confusing part is they also are, the mechanical code is also recognizing increases in travel distance in the mechanical code, which
Yeah, it seems kind of awkward.
The square footage seems to be different too.
Yeah. Well, and the chapter 10 language says square footage and has large boilers.
That's boiler, excuse me, that's boiler rooms, excuse me. We need to be down in refrigeration rooms. I apologize.
That's all right.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Refrigeration room, which is 622.
I mean, I guess I don't get why this is in the mechanical code. This has nothing to do with a mechanical system. I mean, you could, like you said, address it saying that you shall have these number of exits and then refer to the building code. But all these, travel distance and panic hardware, I mean, the mechanical folks.
It's already in the building code. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Would I recommend to use just saying machinery rooms larger than 1,000 square feet
refer
shall
to,
comply with section 1006.2.2 of the building code? Just, there's a reminder that if you're over 1,000 square feet, but go elsewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Would that?
I agree with that, Mark.
Did you? I'll put down some notes on that. So, okay.
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Thanks,
They
Laura.
said in the significant changes book, it just says that they don't want it to be overlooked.
So we're capturing from what I'm getting you, we're capturing the don't overlook it, but find the language elsewhere, which is normally what we try and do. And here's where you go to.
Great. I mean, it just goes back to in my documentation principles of say it once in the best place. Then you won't say it twice wrong. Anyway.
All right. Wow. Okay, here's a lot of new stuff for our book. So a fairly simple refrigerant piping has now been changed to sections 1107 through 1110 on refrigerant piping, where we're getting into specific for refrigeration, the piping materials. And sort of, Laura, just sort of do a slow scroll down through. Specific refrigerant materials and a schedule for that. I think 1107, we finally get down through copper and steel and swage fittings and how to construct and depth of the fittings. About expansion joints, vibration compensators, and also getting to
I didn't understand that.
Down to joints and connections in 1108. Through the different joints and types and how things can be put together, including press connection joints, soldered fittings, threaded fittings, welded fittings, aluminum tube. We can roll through this, Laura, down to the next page and down to installation and the hangers and supports with the B315. The part about minimum height of exposed refrigerant piping, which we had in our last code, making sure you won't, if you need to get out of the room quickly, you aren't going to bump your, and it's filled with refrigerant fog, you can get out quickly without bumping your head. Pointing out to some past prohibitions, we had not allowed refrigerant piping to be in exit passageways. Just being, their list is a lot more clear. Here is additional information about requirements for A2 and B2L refrigerants. Shaft ventilation requirements, if you have some of these that are potentially flammable or not as flammable refrigerants. Definitely higher ventilation needed for A2, A3, or B3, which are, you know, a little more hazardous refrigerants. Talking about pipe penetrations in more detail. Looking at stress and strain on pipe. We'll go up to the top, unless you see something you want to stop and discuss about. Looking at condensate control to make sure, you know, it's not raining in the room from refrigerant or getting ice build up, or reducing that at least. Then back to, I believe 908.1. I need to make sure that is not but about for stop valves for systems with more than 6.6 pounds of refrigerant. Some items for valves on systems over 100 pounds. I believe this will wind up being a cost impact. And then as we go down, supports for the valves, identification of valves is a lot more detailed. You know, these are for bigger, say, systems like at a refrigerated warehouse, something that's a supermarkets, really big on that. And then refrigerant system piping test. Let you read that for a second while I bring up the I'll try and see if there are any specific under the current piping. So let's go down to the bottom of this, Laura, and then now can you bring up the 20 for our current OMSC, just to show section 1107 of our current, just to give. So we now have specific test apparatus and leak testing requirements that aren't are a little milder. So Laura, if you could bring up 1107 and 1108 of the current OMSC, that would be great.
In the meantime, what does the green text indicate?
Green?
Yeah, for like 111008, or excuse me, 1110.8. It's showing up as green from my screen.
That should be black.
Yeah, it's black.
That's existing.
Oh, okay. Just an illusion, thanks.
Yes, I think that is.
Chapter 11.
I think there may be, it's very similar to our current 1108.4 about certificate of test. So shall be provided for all systems containing 55 pounds or more. So yes, that's our current 1108.4. So if we can scroll up and just roll down through 7 and 8 just to show the difference in detail of what was in the old code. You can just the OMSC, I think, first. Really, you need to slide that a little bit to the. Just want to give you an idea of the change in scope that's involved with this. So scroll up to the start of 1107, and we'll roll down through this. We have the design needs to be in accordance with B11, B31.5, ASME B31.5. What they're doing is bringing a lot of that language in. We're maintaining, so the pipe prohibition locations are pretty much the same as the passcode where they are and aren't allowed. Definitely don't want them ever in an exit passageway. Some of the penetration language is found in 7.2.2 enclosures and condensation control. Then materials are now moving in of 1107.5 are moving into sort of a table with some more options, different discussions about the different tube types. It's a bit more detailed than we currently have. Stop valves. It again has the trigger at 6.6 pounds of refrigerant in a system. Then it doesn't have the language of there's a second requirement for bigger systems with stop valves. Well, no, that is in 1107.8.1. You'll see a 100-pound system needing stop valves. Then it moves on to the field testing and how they do the field testing with the declaration at the end and signed by the installer and shall be made part of the public record is the current 1108.4. So that gives you an idea of what's being replaced now with materials and all the joints and what can be in here. I believe from the looks of it, they're just moving away from sub-referencing to other standards and bringing the language in. So if we can go back to our purple document, has a lot more information on the pipe materials, the joint connections, and even adding things for pipe and concrete floors, the surface temperatures of piping and how to protect on those, because some can get very hot and some can get extremely cold. And more on identification and additional items for flammable and potentially toxic refrigerants on what to do when, how you protect them, and if they're in a shaft, what to do to ventilate those if need be.
I see that ASME 31.5 is still referenced as the design standard, which is useful. I personally like bringing a lot of this material requirement into the code, just so you're not having to dive out of it to another standard that may or may not be sitting on your desk.
So to the group, is the model code language okay to make a move to with, you know, more detail in the code for refrigerant systems?
I think so. It's an awful lot of information to take in, though.
If you'd like to have a little more time, and if you want to come back to it, we can say yes for now. And if people see something over the, you know, between now and the next meeting, if you want to come back to it, would that be okay with the group? All right, so
Just gonna bump in one more time and guess what I'm gonna say. But Mark, and you mentioned there's likely a fiscal impact in there, but as folks are taking a look at that language, if you could be particularly mindful of any sort of specifics you can give me on that, I would appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
all right. With that, There was one last item. Did we cover 11? We didn't cover 11.5 about access port protection, 1102.3, where we this is putting in a post occupancy, or this set a trigger to put on the locking cap valves whenever you maintain a system, whenever refrigerant is added or removed from a system. And this was one thing that the committee and the division kind of found hard to be able to put into code to have that trigger when it might be something that's not having a permit pulled for it, or knowing, was someone at a site, did you put refrigerant in, and telling them there's no requirement for a permit, but telling them to put in an X, the locking caps, whether they were there or not, whether it was triggered in the past. This was a difficult one for us to keep in. And if you can go to 1101.9, where is that? The locking access caps. They need the tamper resistant caps anywhere except for where it's, not accessible, such as behind a door, locked hatch, whatever. So this would be a trigger that if you maintain the unit, you have to, and you take a cap off, you need to put on the new locking style. Is that something you wish to address again, or leave as is, as being deleted in current Oregon?
Well, I think it should only apply to new installations myself. Although if a piece of equipment was replaced, would they then have to put the access port caps on, the locking ones?
Yes.
Yes, for a new piece of equipment, they'd have to do that. So this is a trigger if they're going to do some maintenance, say, put in 5 pounds of new refrigerant. Where that, is it at only at the one they access, or the whole system then you're looking at?
Yeah, I'm thinking only new equipment.
We have a hand raise, Rich Anderson.
Just going to let you know that the reason statement that was submitted to remove this from the model code was it's housed in the wrong code. The proponent of removing this didn't argue that it's an important fact. However, it should be maybe in the property maintenance code or the existing building code and not in the mechanical code. If that helps you.
Absolutely. Great.
That makes sense. Because you're not going to pull a permit to add some refrigerant. So.
Right. Thank you. So keep that as is, as shown, as a striking. All right. All right. We're down to 12. At 12:10, if we have one item in chapter 12 about modifying for the different, for hydronic piping, to make sure we cover, I believe it's all the different PEX piping when you're doing embedded that had been left out. So if you're doing a radiant heating system, allowing some of these other more common systems that are used in embedded piping. It's been around, I'm trying to figure out how many, this may even predate my days here. Any opinions on whether to keep the current amendment, change? bring up.
So this is just spelling out specific requirements, right? Rather than just getting wrapped into the approved plastic or pipe.
I was going to bring up one thing. And let me find that. I believe under hydronic piping in, the residential code has the PEX pipings for radiant heating. I believe that was just catching, sort of having that alignment between the two was the primary reason for avoiding having to say the word, having to approve any other piping, since that seems to be pretty much industry. I don't know, any of you building officials seeing radiant systems much anymore in commercial or heated floor slabs?
The last one was 17 years ago, so not real recent.
All right. All of that could also potentially apply to, snow melt systems and the like as well. So
I'm just wondering grammatically if the underlined bits should go above or in front of or other approved plastic piping or tubing.
we can make that editorial, to make it clearer. Would that be, we'll put that in as a note with, if that's okay with everyone else, just have that before the other approved. It really should be higher. Grammatical, okay? The editorial changing. All right, so we are there. That is our, I believe, the last of the substantive changes through chapter 15. 13 is fuel oil, solar thermal has been something that we have very little in solar thermal that we handle in the mechanical sections, simply due to it's normally potable water. And we can't do anything about it if it's so much. Any solar system that heats something under the plumbing code, it all falls to the plumbing code at that point. But occasionally you might see a swimming pool system or something like that, and that's where this chapter would fall in. The photovoltaics, building code, and electrical code. Chapter, let's see here. We can go to chapter 15 just to show it. Oops. Yeah, just reference standards. We'll make sure those are up to date. That's more an editorial thing for us anyway. As we look through these, we'll just make sure, unless you see one that you'd like to keep as the 1888 version, we can definitely be open to that. If the committee, we can make that recommendation if the committee sees fit. It's 12:15. We can wrap up for the day. I did want to let everyone know that one big item that is being discussed at the reason why ventilation is for the next one is because of some of the proposals that have come in. And it's going to be very tricky from our standpoint and also the commercial code standpoint. The way we currently leave code in Oregon is that we say chapter 12 is the building code. Natural ventilation is the building code world. They look at the windows, they determine whether or not you can go the natural ventilation path. If it's mechanical, it's all chapter 4. If it uses a fan to move it in and out, whether it's exhaust, fresh air, whatever, we're using chapter 4. So some of the proposals have to do with both the structural code, because some of it's with dwelling units, and There are two different codes that deal with dwelling units. Of course, we've got the low rise that's statutorily under the RMSB. They have authority. Hey, Jeff, are you trying to get in? I think I saw you trying to talk here. You're muted. Okay, so we have potentially 3, if not 4 boards that might have to look at some of these ventilation issues. The proposals are looking at, of course, currently the way the code is read and the way the structural board has passed this is that ventilation is triggered where buildings are tested for air leakage. So we've never had this requirement for dwelling units to actively have to have mechanical ventilation. It's now going to where one of the proposals is to say, and there's a bit of a conflict between where the mechanical code says it, the triggers, and where the structural code says the triggers. The structural code still says where tested. The energy code is now saying you pretty much have to test, but there's an option that's still to get you out of having to test in the buildings. So there's still a potential ability to have natural ventilation for dwelling units, 1 and 2, R2, R3, R4. Let's just say that, okay? So it gets very tricky of if this now becomes permanently mandatory that all dwelling units shall have mechanical ventilation, there's also a trigger that they have to have energy recovery units. No way out once you get to the mechanical ventilation path, which is a big hit to that. Lots of boards are going to be interested in the SEEB, the structural board, the residential board, because that's their 3-story walk-ups, and even the energy board. These proposals and what's happening in model code have some big impact. So that's why it's left for another meeting. We'd probably still be talking about it at 3 or 4 o'clock today if we were doing it. So that's why we're leaving it for the kickoff of next meeting, and we really hope to see people there. And I know we're hitting into people's lunch hour, so would ask folks to look through the proposals and the pieces that are out there. Kevin, there's one gas piping proposal that's out there. We've got some comments on that, and what we've had to do here in Oregon in the past due to our electrical program. So thank you, everyone. Any further questions? Feel free. Andy, do you have any closing statements?
No. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate that. Glad we got through this. Have a good lunch. We will see you there. The date may change. Who does inspection day today? We'll try and see if we can accommodate you, Jeff. Sorry but now you can go out on the road.
Believe me, I've been getting, my phone's been blowing up today. Must have got 12 calls already.
Oh, all right, Jeff.
It's
Thank you
okay.
very much. Thank you,
I'll have to
Kevin.
wait.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you,
Thank
Rich,
you.
for popping in. Ted, thank you for popping in for a while.
Welcome.
Laura and the rest of the staff. Thank you.
Good to meet
Have a good
everybody.
day, folks.
Take care.
All right, we're done.
All right. Have a good day.
Yep, we're all set.
Bye.